Hello, welcome to our poster titled Caregivers Perspectives on the Transition from School to Adulthood for the Youth with Significant Disabilities. The transition from school to adulthood is a complex process for youth with disabilities. Adolescents aging out of the school system and subsequently losing access to special education services under IDEA may face barriers when attempting to transition into post-secondary education, employment, and independent living settings. Given the unique and often extensive nature of their support needs, students with significant disabilities, such as an intellectual disability, autism, or multiple disabilities, face additional challenges and meet their post-secondary outcomes at an even lower rate. There are many factors that may influence this transition into post-secondary options for students with significant disabilities. Specifically, it has been researched that caregivers' perspectives towards employment remain one of the most important influences that could potentially impact the career outcomes of these individuals. Although previous findings provide important contributions to this issue, further research that includes youth with significant disabilities is needed, as both the characteristics and needs of this population are often far different from those of individuals with high incidence disabilities. Because of the additional challenges these youth face in entering the workforce, as well as the increased involvement of their caregivers in their lives, exploring perspectives and aspirations of their families is integral to understanding and improving the post-secondary outcomes. Therefore, this present study sought to answer the following research questions. First, what are caregivers' expectations regarding the post-secondary employment outcomes of their youth? Next, what factors influenced caregivers in developing these expectations? And finally, how do caregivers communicate these expectations to their youth? While caregivers often differed in the specific outcome that they expected for their adolescents, each participant indicated that a life with meaning was an essential factor for their child. Additionally, it was clear that caregivers placed weight on how the outcomes would impact their adolescent rather than the specific setting in which they would end up. Caregivers stressed that if their adolescent were to transition into an employment setting, it was important that it not simply be something to fill their time. Two participants indicated that work does not need to be the central source of joy in the lives of the adolescents. Yet, they did emphasize the importance of making a livable wage and engaging in meaningful and productive work activities. Caregivers and their families had differing views of the value of work and what work can and should bring to one's life. This seemed to impact the expectation that their youth would or would not participate in post-secondary employment. While some emphasized the integral role work plays within one's life, others felt that there are more important things than being employed. The value that caregivers placed on work also impacted the vocational experiences that were afforded to the adolescent, which is consistent with the constructs of the expectancy value theory. In 2 interviews, employment was brought up immediately when interviewers inquired about caregivers' post-secondary expectations for their adolescent. Subsequently, the same participants provided vocational experiences for their adolescent or advocated for these experiences within the school setting. Caregivers that view their adolescent as having more extensive support needs seem to believe that their employment options would be more limited or they would be unlikely to become employed at all. All families had their child's best interest in mind, and it is interesting to see how work was valued and if that had an impact on their expectations. We plan to continue this research as this is preliminary data that we have found.